And now Israel is not only fighting a war on the battlefield in Gaza and in the north against Hezbollah, it's also fighting a war against anti-Semitism and a war for global public opinion. This secondary war is no less critical as today we're seeing the growing tides of anti-Semitism in the West, reminiscent of the darkest times in Jewish history. And so joining us in the studio now to discuss all this and more is Stefan Tompson, the founder of Visegrad 24, one of the largest, if not the largest, news platforms in Central and Eastern Europe. Stefan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So first, let's start with the reason why you're here in Israel. Just this week, you were honored by Amichai Shikli, the Minister of Diaspora Affairs and Combating Anti-Semitism, for your extraordinary role and actions to combat anti-Semitism since October 7th. You've been countering misinformation online about Israel, about this war, and I'm curious, what led you to take on this role?
That's a very wide question. It's an excellent question. Visegrad is a project that I've been building over the last several years. Initially, it was focused on Central and Eastern Europe, and it was exclusively Central and Eastern European. We realized that the battle that we were facing was not only with the radical elements within our own societies who are sort of working against the order that we have built from within. The West has been built, and we have the enemies within the gates. We have radical progressives who are pushing back against the very values that have turned the West into the greatest civilization of all time. This is the best time to be alive in the history of the world. And the forces that we are fighting, aside from the radical progressives within our own societies, is this combined axis of Iran, China, Russia, Qatar, and their various acolytes. The war that is happening here, it's not a land war, it's not a war about Israel even in many ways. Of course it is to the people who are living here and to the people whose families are hostages. And of course there is a land war with Hamas, but it's part of a much broader conflict. It's an intrinsic part of a battle for Western civilization. That is why I'm here. The award from Minister Shikli, the work that I've done, it's not even combating anti-Semitism as much as it is combating anti-Western sentiment. And that is very much the fight that I'm involved in, and I'm very proud to fight alongside a great number of incredible people here in Israel.
You know, you mentioned the fight against not only Israel, but against the West and Western culture.
Sure.
You know, how do you see Israel's efforts to win this war against anti-Semitism, and against Gaza, against, these elements of extremist Islamist ideology, and the war over public opinion as well in Europe? Because, looking at the capitals of the West today,
sure,
you see more anti-Israel, anti-West hate than you see in some Arab countries. I mean, how do you explain this?
The land war will be won without a doubt. The war for public opinion is a very difficult one because the enemy that we face is more numerous in terms of absolute numbers. I think that the issue that we're seeing is that Israel and the West brings facts to the table. It turns out that their feelings do not care about our facts, and that they have superseded all of our facts. They're completely disregarded. What we're seeing in Western capitals, especially places where I grew up that I feel very strongly about, I grew up in London, seeing 300,000 people on Remembrance Sunday marching with Palestinian flags, chanting from the river to the sea, or Yemen, Yemen, make us proud, is absolutely staggering, shocking, worrying. But I believe that as we see this increased presence on the streets, there is a silent majority that is regrettably silent, but that is terrified of what is happening. And I believe that, and I believe we will see some form of correction. But I don't think there is much that can be done because of how numerous the enemy is and how well organized the disinformation efforts against us are. The only thing that can be done, and this is what I try to do on a micro level, is to create as good content as possible in order to counter this wave of fake news and misinformation.
And we really are seeing sort of a targeted campaign of misinformation online.
Absolutely. There is no doubt about it, and there is a long-term strategy. The preparations for what has been happening now, this is not Hamas's PR operations. This truly is a combined effort of several nefarious states that have combined forces that have very powerful tools, from the Qataris using Al Jazeera to the Russians using Russian Today to bot farms around from Algino to TikTok promoting purposefully pro-Hamas propaganda. And we've seen this on our own accounts. We have a fairly large TikTok account where, since the coverage that we have conducted of the Israel-Hamas war, our videos have gone from, on average, several 100,000 views to not crossing 1,000 views on TikTok. This is a concerted effort where we're fighting algorithms, we're fighting genuine online users, and we're fighting states that have long-term strategies that are not just anti-Semitic, but that are fundamentally anti-Western. And I do think that much of this conflict is, as much as I understand Israelis who think of it in terms of just anti-Semitism, I do very strongly feel that this is a much broader war, that this is a war we are in together. Obviously, you are at the front line. It is Israelis dying today. But if we do not win this war, if we do not stop the enemy at the gates, this conflict will keep going.
And hearing you speak, I have to ask: are you concerned for the future of Europe, for the future of the West?
I am concerned for the future of the West. I am concerned that the values that have built it have been disappearing, and I have a very deep fear that there is a lack of understanding in Western society that order is incredibly fragile and that life is very fragile. This is something that the Jews, the Jewish diaspora, the Israelis profoundly understand because of generational trauma, of a very difficult history where life is incredibly uncertain. The last 70 years since the victory in World War II have been the victory of the West has been complete. The level of comfort has been extraordinary, of economic comfort, physical comfort. There's no real challenges facing the Western world, which means that suddenly we have forgotten that all the things that have been built at a great cost it's a tremendous cost of generations of people who've put work into building what we have, the freedoms that we have, the luxuries that we have, the economic freedoms and the economic potential and the ability to create wealth and social mobility and all these things that have made the West great. There is a lack of understanding that there was a fight to build all of that and that it can all go. So yes, I'm deeply, deeply concerned. But I'm a religious person, so I have to be optimistic. I have a great deal of hope that we will emerge victorious in one way or another, and there is an optimism in me. I think there are many people who are waking up and who are willing to fight for the West, and there is a joy from the willingness to fight.
And Visegrad 24, the platform that you've built, I mean, it's really blown up over the past couple months or even before that. I mean,
Sure.
Do you ever imagine that it would be so large of an audience? And maybe the reason for that is because there really is a need, and people maybe are starting to wake up and understand that the threat against Israel is also a threat against the West.
Yeah, it's been it's been very rewarding, and in fact, it's quite moving. I didn't expect it to blow up to the extent that it has. It's doing 1 billion impressions a month right now. Our YouTube channel has been growing exponentially. We've gone from just aggregating news to actually sort of in-depth interviews and long formats and street surveys, and there's an expansion of all of that is really interesting. I'm very happy that it's worked out the way it has, and I'm very grateful there's people who are willing to listen, and I hope that I won't disappoint anyone and that my team won't disappoint anyone. I'm very proud of, it's a collaborative work. There's many people who are involved, so I obviously it's me sitting here, but there's a lot of other people that I have to thank and that I'm very grateful to work with, and I hope that we can just keep building it into something that keeps providing an objective and unbiased view of various conflicts and of covering things that are not being covered the way they should, be it the Israel-Hamas conflict, be it the persecution of Christians in Nigeria by Islamist groups, or be it Bukele's reforms in El Salvador that have cleaned up the country of gang criminality. So all these things that are being ignored by the mainstream that we have been focusing on.
Well, Stefan, continue doing the incredible work that you and your team are doing.
Thank you so much
for joining us today.
Thank you.